Dr. Voss set down her stylus and looked directly at Vextar. What kind of medical conference? Sujin said she was concerned about the psychological effects of the occupation on both our soldiers and the colonists. She wanted to organize a joint medical symposium to discuss stress management and cultural adaptation techniques. Vextar's skin shifted to a mottled brown. It sounded very professional and humanitarian. Your commander agreed to this? Commander Zekthul was suspicious, but our military psychologists were interested. We had been dealing with unusual behavioral issues among the troops. Soldiers who seemed reluctant to maintain aggressive postures, others who asked too many questions about human culture, some who volunteered for extra duties that involved interacting with colonists. What kind of behavioral issues? Empathy, Vextar said simply. Your people were making our soldiers care about them. Not through manipulation or propaganda, but just by being themselves. Friendly, curious, helpful. It was undermining military discipline in ways we had never encountered. Dr. Voss made notes. So you attended the conference? 50 of our medical and psychological staff attended. The conference was held in the colony's main meeting hall, with presentations from both human and hegemony speakers. Very organized, very academic. What did you discuss? Sujin presented a paper on treating combat stress through community integration. Jin Wu discussed agricultural therapy for trauma recovery. Hai-Jin talked about educational approaches to cross-cultural understanding. That sounds normal. It was normal. Everything was completely legitimate. The research was solid, the recommendations were practical, the discussions were enlightening. Vextar paused. While the conference was happening, the rest of the colony was preparing for war. What do you mean? During the 8 hours our command staff spent listening to presentations about peaceful conflict resolution, every other adult in the colony was quietly transforming their civilian infrastructure into military assets. Dr. Voss looked confused. How? Minho, the baker, had been experimenting with explosive compounds disguised as bread ingredients. His ovens could produce either food or incendiary devices, depending on what recipe he followed. The loaves looked identical, but some would feed you and others would remove obstacles. He was making explosive bread? He was making bread that could explode when needed. But mostly it was just bread. Very good bread, according to our soldiers who had eaten it all week without any problems. How did you know it could explode? Because Yun Young demonstrated during the children's science presentation. She was showing how chemical reactions create different results depending on temperature and timing. Her example used Minho's bread ingredients to create small, controlled explosions that spelled out words in the air, a science lesson that happened to prove that every meal our soldiers had eaten could have killed them at any moment, if the colonists had chosen different recipes. Vextar began pacing again, his movements sharp and agitated. While Minho was perfecting his dual-purpose baking, other colonists were making their own preparations. The mechanics had modified all the farming equipment to serve as weapons platforms. The teachers had developed educational games that were actually tactical training exercises. The medical staff had created treatment protocols that could either heal or incapacitate, depending on which medications they chose to use. Everything served two purposes. Everything served as many purposes as human creativity could devise. A children's playground could be a recreational area, a defensive position, a communications relay, a weapons emplacement, or a trap depending on how you activated the various components. Dr. Voss stopped typing and stared at him. They turned a playground into a weapon? They built a playground that could become a weapon if necessary. But mostly it was just a playground where human children played games and learned social skills. The fact that those same games taught tactical awareness and those social skills included coordination under pressure was just efficient design. When did you realize what was happening? When Jae-sung started the evening entertainment. Entertainment? Jae-sung was the colony librarian. Quiet man. Spent most of his time reading and organizing information. During the conference, he offered to provide cultural programming for our off-duty soldiers. Stories and music from different worlds to help with cross-cultural understanding. What kind of stories? Vextar's skin went completely pale. Stories from our homeworlds. Traditional tales that every hegemony child knew, but told in ways that highlighted themes of defeat, surrender, and death. Lullabies from our nurseries, but with slight changes that turned them into funeral songs. He was threatening you? He was entertaining us perfectly. Every story was historically accurate, every song was traditionally correct. But the selection and presentation created a psychological atmosphere of impending doom, using our own cultural symbols to make us afraid. How did he know your cultural symbols? Because humans pay attention. For 6 months before we arrived, your people had been studying our public broadcasts, our literature, our art, our music. They learned our languages, our customs, our fears, our weaknesses, not as intelligence gathering, but as cultural appreciation. Dr. Voss frowned. Cultural appreciation? Your people are genuinely curious about other species. You study alien cultures because you find them interesting, not because you want to exploit them. But that innocent curiosity creates encyclopedic knowledge that can be weaponized if necessary. Jae-sung weaponized. Your own culture against you. Jae-sung shared our culture with us in ways that reminded us of our mortality. While he told stories, other colonists provided refreshments. Foods that smelled exactly like the traditional meals eaten at hegemony funeral ceremonies. The combination was psychologically devastating. What happened to your soldiers? Panic attacks. Severe depression. Complete loss of fighting spirit. Half our force requested immediate medical evacuation. The other half asked for transfers to non-combat roles. Vextar sat down heavily and buried his face in his hands. That was when Commander Zekethul called for orbital bombardment. Dr. Voss looked up sharply. You bombed the colony? We tried. Commander Zekethul determined that the human psychological warfare was too effective to counter with conventional tactics. He requested permission to eliminate the colony from orbit, claiming it was a legitimate military target. What happened? Sangho happened. Who was Sangho? The colony's educational coordinator. He managed the school system and organized community learning programs. When our orbital weapons began charging, he sent us a message. What kind of message? An invitation to a graduation ceremony. He said the colony's children had been working on a special project about space defense systems, and they wanted to demonstrate what they had learned before we left. Your commander ignored this? Commander Zekethul assumed it was a desperate bluff. He proceeded with the bombardment sequence, but when our weapons fired, nothing happened to the colony. Nothing. The energy beams were redirected, absorbed by some kind of dispersal network and converted into harmless light displays. Very pretty fireworks that the human children watched and applauded. Dr. Voss stared at him. They had orbital defense shields. They had a science project. The children had been studying energy absorption and redirection as part of their physics curriculum. Their teacher helped them build a practical demonstration using modified solar collectors and atmospheric processors. A school project stopped your orbital bombardment. A school project that happened to function as a planetary defense system. The children were very proud of their work. They invited our tactical officers to visit and see the technical specifications. Vextar looked directly at Dr. Voss. That was when we finally understood. This was not a farming colony defended by civilians. This was a human settlement. And apparently, there is no difference. Dr. Voss refilled her water glass from a pitcher on the side table. The simple movement made Vextar flinch. Every casual human gesture reminded him of Kepler 442b, where nothing was as simple as it seemed. Tell me about the real fighting, she said. Vextar's skin rippled with colors that had no human equivalent, shades of fear mixed with something like respect. It started on the third night. Patrol leader Kextan was doing a routine perimeter check with 5 soldiers. Standard formation, full equipment, thermal scanners, motion detectors. They were professionals. What happened to them? They vanished. Dr. Voss waited for more explanation. Not killed. Not captured. Vanished. Their communication signals simply stopped at 0347 hours. No distress calls, no weapons fire, no struggle. When the morning patrol found their equipment, everything was neatly arranged in a circle. Weapons cleaned and unloaded, armor polished. A small note in Korean that our translator said meant thank you for visiting. Where were your soldiers? Gone. 5 trained warriors, each one capable of fighting a dozen enemies, just gone. We searched for 6 hours. No bodies, no blood, no tracks leading away from the site. It was like they had been erased. Dr. Voss made notes. What did your commander think happened? Commander Zekethul believed it was some kind of advanced technology. Maybe teleportation or cloaking devices. He ordered full sensor sweeps of the entire area, looking for hidden installations or alien artifacts. Did you find anything? We found Taman again. He was working on another pipe, this time behind the grain storage building. Same muddy coveralls, same frustrated expression. When we asked him about the missing patrol, he seemed genuinely worried. Offered to help us search the underground areas since he knew the tunnel system better than anyone. You let him help? Commander Zekthol thought it was a good idea. Taman knew every meter of underground space. He could guide our search teams through the tunnels safely. Vextar made that bitter sound again. Safely. That word meant something different to humans. What did you find in the tunnels? Everything and nothing. The tunnels were exactly as Taman described them. Utility passages, storage rooms, emergency shelters. Everything had a clear civilian purpose. But there were also things that seemed slightly wrong. Wrong how? Distances that did not match our surface measurements. Rooms that appeared on Taman's maps but were somehow not there when we looked. Passages that led to dead ends even though our sensors showed open space beyond the walls. Dr. Voss leaned forward. The tunnels were more complex than he told you. The tunnels were more complex than our minds could understand. Taman had spent 3 years creating a 3-dimensional maze that looked simple, but functioned like a puzzle. Every path had multiple purposes. Every room could be reached from several directions. Every dead end was actually a hidden entrance to somewhere else. Where were your missing soldiers? Safe, comfortable, confused. Vextar began pacing again. Taman led us to a section that our maps showed as water treatment facilities. Instead, we found 5 hegemony soldiers sitting around a table playing cards with 2 human children. Dr. Voss blinked. Children? Young humans, maybe 10 or 12 years old. They had taught our soldiers a card game called Go Fish and were winning consistently. The soldiers seemed happy, relaxed. When they saw us, they looked surprised. They didn't know they were missing. They thought they had been underground for maybe 2 hours. Our chronometers showed they had been missing for 18 hours. But they were not hungry, not tired, not distressed. Someone had been taking very good care of them. Someone, the children mostly, a boy named Min Ho and a girl named Eun Young. They explained that they had found our soldiers wandering in the tunnels looking lost. So they had brought them food and games to keep them entertained while adults figured out how to help them find their way back to the surface. Dr. Voss was typing rapidly. The soldiers were lost in the tunnels? That is what everyone believed, including our soldiers. But when we reviewed their helmet recordings later, the truth was more disturbing. They had not gotten lost. They had been guided. Guided by who? Different people. A maintenance worker here, a school teacher there, a friendly farmer who knew a shortcut. Each person gave them helpful directions to find their patrol route. Each set of directions was completely accurate. But somehow following those directions led deeper into the tunnel system instead of back to the surface. Deliberate misdirection. Perfectly innocent misdirection. Every human told the truth. The maintenance worker really was showing them the fastest route to the surface. The teacher really did know where their patrol path was supposed to be. The farmer really was helping them avoid getting lost. But the tunnels themselves were designed to make those directions misleading. Exactly. Taman had built a system where helpful people could give honest directions that would still send visitors exactly where the colony wanted them to go. Vextar sat down and stared at his hands. The children, Minho and Yun Young, were not innocent either. While they played cards with our soldiers, they asked the same kinds of questions Sujin had asked at the medical station. Friendly questions about home and family and military training. They were very good listeners. The children were gathering intelligence too. The children were doing what human children do, asking questions and remembering the answers. But their parents had taught them which questions were most important to ask and which details were most useful to remember. Dr. Voss looked uncomfortable. They used their children? They used their community. Everyone had a role. Everyone contributed what they could. The children happened to be very good at making lonely soldiers feel comfortable and willing to talk. What happened next? More patrols went missing. Always the same pattern. Equipment found neatly arranged. Soldiers discovered hours later, safe and comfortable and confused about how much time had passed. Some were playing games with human children. Some were helping human adults with repairs or construction projects. Some were just sitting and talking with elderly humans about philosophy and art. Your soldiers were being entertained? Your people were being hospitable. Perfect hosts who made sure their guests were fed and comfortable and engaged in interesting activities. The fact that this prevented us from completing our military objectives was just a side effect. Vextar stood up and walked to the corner of the room, as far from Dr. Voss as he could get. By the end of the first week, we had lost 37 soldiers. Not killed, not wounded, just absorbed into daily life in the colony. They would disappear during patrols and reappear helping with the harvest or learning to cook human food or discussing literature with the librarian. What did your commander do? Commander Zekthul banned all underground operations. No more tunnel searches. No more following helpful colonists. No more accepting invitations for tours or meals or cultural exchanges. We would stay on the surface and maintain strict military discipline. Did that work? Vextar turned back to face the human doctor. All three of his eyes were the deep purple of distress. That was when Sujin invited us to the medical conference. Vextar returned to his chair and picked up the water container. This time his hands were steady. Remembering seemed to help somehow, even if the memories were terrible. The explosions came from everywhere at once, he continued. Not big ones. Small, precise blasts that took out our communication equipment, our transport vehicles, our supply containers. Nothing that would hurt the crops or damage the colony buildings. Dr. Voss looked up from her notes. Surgical strikes. That is what our tactical analysis called them later. But in the moment, we just thought it was some kind of automated defense system, maybe hidden weapons left by the previous colony ship. Vextar made that bitter laugh again. We were so stupid. What made you realize it wasn't automated? The timing. Each explosion happened exactly when it would cause the most confusion, but the least actual damage. Someone was watching us, studying our reactions, learning how we moved and fought. Someone very smart. Dr. Voss waited for him to continue. Commander Zekthul ordered a full sweep of the area. We had 300 soldiers moving in perfect formation, scanning for hidden weapons or bunkers. Professional, coordinated exactly like the training manuals taught us. Did you find anything? We found Taemin. The alien's skin shifted to a lighter shade, what might have been embarrassment. He was fixing a broken water pipe behind the school building, covered in mud, cursing in Korean about whoever had designed the plumbing system. He looked up when our patrol found him and seemed genuinely surprised. Another farmer, mining engineer supposedly, said he had been working underground for years digging mineral surveys for the colony. He seemed frustrated about being interrupted, asked if we could wait 20 minutes for him to finish the repair because the children needed clean water for lunch. Dr. Voss frowned. Your soldiers let him continue working? Lieutenant Cardos thought it was good psychology. Show the locals we were not monsters, that we cared about their children having water. So we waited. Taemin worked on his pipe, making small talk about soil conditions and mining rights. Very boring conversation. But he wasn't really fixing pipes. Oh, he was definitely fixing pipes. The water started flowing perfectly. But while he worked, Taemin was also doing other things we did not notice until much later. Vextar stood up again and began pacing around the small room. Movement helped him think about the details without seeing them too clearly. Taemin had been underground for 3 years, but not just for mining surveys. He had been building tunnels, storage areas, communication lines, supply routes, an entire secondary colony beneath the one we could see. A military installation? No, that is what made it so clever. Everything had a civilian purpose. The tunnels were for moving water and power lines between buildings. The storage areas were for emergency supplies during bad weather. The communication lines were for coordinating work schedules and school activities. Dr. Voss was typing quickly again, but they could be used for military purposes. They were being used for military purposes right while we watched. While Taemin fixed his pipe and complained about bureaucracy, other colonists were moving through his tunnel system, taking positions, moving supplies, coordinating the next phase of their plan. What was the next phase? Vextar sat down heavily. Sujin. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his scaled hands. Dr. Voss waited. Sujin was the colony doctor. Small human, maybe 40 years old. She had set up a medical station in the town square, with clean white sheets and organized supply boxes. When our soldiers started getting injured from the explosion, she offered to help. She treated your wounded? Perfectly. Professional medical care. Exactly what our field manuals said to expect from civilian doctors. She spoke softly to the injured soldiers, kept them calm, gave them pain medication. Our medics were impressed with her skills. What was wrong with that? Nothing was wrong with it. That was the problem. Vextar looked directly at Dr. Voss. Your people are terrifying because you can do exactly what you say you will do. Sujin said she was a doctor helping injured soldiers. She was telling the truth. But there was more to it. While she treated our wounded, Sujin asked questions. Friendly questions. The kind doctors ask to keep patients talking. Where are you from? How long have you been in the military? Do you have family? What kind of training did you receive? Very natural, very caring. Dr. Voss nodded. Standard medical conversation. Yes, but Sujin remembered everything. Every detail about our military structure, our homeworlds, our family customs, our training methods. She was building a complete intelligence profile of our entire force, one wounded soldier at a time. And your soldiers told her? Of course they told her. She was helping them. She was kind and gentle and professional. They trusted her. Vextar's skin darkened again. They had no reason not to trust her. What did she do with the information? She shared it. While she worked, other colonists would stop by the medical station, bringing supplies, checking on the patients, offering to help. Normal community behavior, but each conversation passed along pieces of intelligence. The baker would mention that some soldiers seemed homesick for their desert planet. The teacher would note that several patients had training scars from a particular type of weapon. The mechanics would observe that our equipment used specific power sources. Dr. Voss looked puzzled. How do you know all this? Because we captured the recordings later. Every colonist carried personal communication devices. They recorded everything, just like your people always do. We thought it was primitive vanity, taking pictures and videos of daily life. We did not realize they were documenting our weaknesses. The entire colony was gathering intelligence. The entire colony was living their normal lives. But normal human life apparently includes paying attention to everything and everyone around you. Your people notice details that trained intelligence officers miss. Vextar walked back to the window and stared out at the stars. By the second day, we realized the small explosions were not random. They were part of a pattern. Every time we adapted our tactics, new explosions would target our new positions. Every time we changed our patrol routes, the attacks would anticipate where we were going. Someone was staying one step ahead. Someone was staying 10 steps ahead. But we still thought it was just one person. Maybe a former military advisor or a clever local leader. We never imagined it was all of them. All of them? Every adult in the colony. The teachers were analyzing our psychological profiles. The farmers were studying our logistical needs. The mechanics were examining our technology. The parents were teaching their children to observe and remember everything they saw. Vextar turned back to face Dr. Voss. On the third morning, Jinwoo came to our command post again. He brought fresh bread and apologized for the inconvenience of the previous day's troubles. He said the colonists had identified the source of the explosions, old mining charges that had been improperly stored. Everything was fixed now. Was it fixed? Oh yes, the random explosions stopped completely. We thought we had won. We thought the resistance was over. Vextar's three eyes all focused on the human doctor. That was when the real fighting began. The lights in the interview room were too bright. Vextar kept blinking his three eyes, trying to adjust to the harsh white glow. His scaled hands shook as he reached for the water container on the metal table. The liquid tasted wrong, but everything tasted wrong since Kepler 442b, Dr. Kira Voss sat across from him, her small human hands folded neatly on her datapad. She looked so ordinary. Brown hair pulled back, simple clothes, calm expression. Just like the others. Just like the ones who had broken his entire army. State your name and rank for the record, she said. Her voice was soft, polite. Vextar's skin crawled. Vextar of the 3rd Claw, former strike leader of the 47th Assault Wing. The words came out rough through his translator device. The machine had been damaged in the fighting, just like everything else. Thank you. This interview is being recorded for the Galactic War Crimes Tribunal. You understand you are here voluntarily? Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter in his species. Voluntary, yes, because the alternative is going back out there, where more of your kind might be waiting. Dr. Voss tilted her head slightly. Tell me about Kepler 442b. Start from the beginning. The alien's middle eye closed while the other two stared at the ceiling. Where to begin? How could he explain to this soft-looking human what her people had done? How could he make her understand why the hegemony, conquerors of 17 star systems, had fled from one small farming colony? We thought it would be easy, he began. Your species was new. We had fought the Zenthari, who could move faster than light without ships. We had beaten the Kalari, who could change their bodies like clay. We had crushed the Vortex swarms that could eat through metal. But you were just humans, slow, weak, new to space travel. What made you choose our colony? The intelligence report said it was perfect. Small population, maybe 10,000. Farmers mostly, some miners. No military installations. No defense satellites. Your people had been there only 5 years. Vextar picked up the water container again, but his hands shook too much to drink. We thought we could take it in 3 days. Maybe less. Dr. Voss made a note on her pad. How many troops did you deploy? 50,000 elite soldiers. The best the hegemony had. Each one worth 10 regular troops. We brought war machines, orbital support, everything. He paused. It should have been like crushing insects. But it wasn't. Vexitar's skin changed color, a deep purple that meant distress in his species. No, it was not. The room fell silent except for the hum of recording equipment. Dr. Voss waited patiently. Humans were good at waiting, Vextar had learned. They were good at many things. The first dropships landed in a wheat field, he continued. Golden plants as far as we could see. It looked peaceful. Beautiful, even. Our sensors showed life signs scattered around the area. We expected to find farmers hiding in their homes, maybe a few local security forces with basic weapons. What did you find instead? Jinwu. The name came out like a curse. We found Jinwu. Dr. Voss leaned forward slightly. Tell me about Jinwu. He was working in the field when we landed. Old human, maybe 50 of your years. Dirt on his hands, simple clothes. He looked up at our dropships like they were mildly interesting, then went back to checking his plants. That seems normal. Vextar's laugh was bitter. Normal, yes, that was the problem. Everything seemed normal. We deployed in standard formation, expecting resistance. Instead, Jinwu walked over to our landing zone. No weapons, no armor, nothing. He had a bag of those earth fruits. Apples, I think you call them. He offered you food? He offered our commander an apple and started talking about the weather. In perfect hegemony standard, not translated, perfect grammar, proper pronunciation. Better than some of our own soldiers could speak it. Dr. Voss made another note. Many colonists learn trade languages. That is what we thought. Commander Zekthul was amused. Here was this primitive farmer trying to make conversation. Zekthul decided to play along. He asked Jinwu about the colony, how many people lived there, what their defenses were. What did Jinwu tell him? Vextar closed all 3 eyes. Everything. Jinwu told him everything. Every building, every tunnel, every person. He drew maps in the dirt with a stick. He explained their patrol schedules, their communication systems, their supply routes. He was completely honest. That sounds like surrender. That is what we thought too. Vexitar opened his eyes and stared at Dr. Voss. Do you know what Jinwu did before he became a farmer? The human doctor waited. He was a soldier, something called Korean Special Forces. 20 years of training in what your people call unconventional warfare. When he retired, he came to Kepler 442b to grow food and raise animals. A simple life, he said. But he wasn't just a farmer anymore. Oh, he was definitely a farmer. Best wheat in the colony, according to the other settlers. But farmers can be other things too, apparently. Vexitar's hand stopped shaking as he warmed to his story. While Jinwu was chatting with Commander Zekthul about crop rotation, his neighbor He-Jin was watching from her house. Sweet old woman taught the colony children, had flour on her apron and a grandmother's smile. What was she really? Communication specialist. While Jinwu kept our commander distracted, she was coordinating with every adult in the colony, using hand signals, reflected light, and a dozen other methods we never spotted. By the time Jinwu finished his helpful conversation, every human on Kepler 442b knew exactly where our forces were positioned. Dr. Voss was typing rapidly now. What happened next? Jinwu thanked Commander Zekthul for listening to an old man's stories. Then he asked if our soldiers were hungry. He said the colonists had prepared a welcome feast. Fresh bread, roasted meat, vegetables from their gardens. He seemed so proud of their hospitality. Poisoned food? No, the food was perfect. Delicious, even. But while we ate, Jinwu and He-Jin and the others excused themselves. They said they wanted to make sure everything was ready for our stay. Such polite hosts. Vextar stood up and walked to the small window in the interview room. Outside, stars sparkled in the darkness of space. Somewhere out there was Kepler 442b. and the humans who had changed everything. When the explosion started, he said quietly, we finally understood. Jin Woo had not been surrendering. He had been conducting a briefing. And we had been the students. Dr. Voss had stopped taking notes. She sat perfectly still, watching Vextar with the same calm attention that had made him nervous at the beginning of the interview. Now he understood why that expression was so unsettling. After the orbital bombardment failed, what did your commander do? Commander Zekthul declared total war. No more attempts at occupation or negotiation. The entire hegemony fleet would converge on Kepler 442b and destroy everything. The colony, the planet's surface, anything that could support human life. How many ships? 3,000 vessels. Every available warship in the sector, plus support craft and troop transports. The largest military force the hegemony had ever assembled. Vextar's skin darkened. We were going to make an example of your species. When did the fleet arrive? 2 weeks later. I was part of the advance assault team that landed while the main fleet took orbital positions. Our mission was simple. Eliminate any remaining resistance and secure the colony for final bombardment. Dr. Voss waited. We expected to find a devastated settlement. Panicked humans hiding in bunkers, maybe a few desperate last stands. Instead, we found a festival. A festival? The colonists were celebrating something called Harvest Day. Colorful decorations, music, dancing, food stalls, games for children. The entire population was gathered in the main square, wearing bright clothes and laughing. They seemed genuinely happy to see us. They weren't afraid. They were excited. Jin Woo explained that they had been preparing a special welcome ceremony for when our fleet arrived. The whole colony had been working together to create something memorable for their visitors. What kind of ceremony? Vextar stood up and walked to the window again. The stars outside looked cold and distant. They wanted to show us Earth culture, music, art, literature, philosophy, all the things that made humanity unique and valuable. They said it was important for us to understand what we were destroying before we destroyed it. They knew you were planning to destroy them? Of course they knew. They had been monitoring our communications since the day we arrived. But instead of running or fighting, they spent 2 weeks preparing a cultural presentation. What did your commander do? Commander Zekthul was suspicious, but the fleet commanders were curious. 3,000 ships had traveled across the galaxy to destroy one small colony. They wanted to see what made these humans think they could survive total annihilation through art and music. Dr. Voss leaned forward. The fleet attended the ceremony? The entire command staff attended. Generals, admirals, strategic planners, intelligence officers. They came to watch the humans perform their final act of defiance. What did the humans perform? Everything. Children sang songs from a dozen different human cultures. Adults performed traditional dances. Elderly humans recited poetry and told stories. They painted pictures and carved sculptures and played musical instruments. It sounds beautiful. It was beautiful, but it was also something else. Vextar turned away from the window. While we watched their cultural presentation, the humans were watching us, learning our reactions, studying our emotions, understanding exactly how each piece of art affected different species in our fleet. They were gathering psychological intelligence through art. They were sharing their culture with genuine enthusiasm, while simultaneously conducting the most sophisticated psychological profiling operation in galactic history. Every song, every dance, every poem was chosen to create specific emotional responses in specific alien species. What kind of responses? Homesickness, wonder, curiosity, respect, fear, love. They found ways to make us feel things we had never expected to feel about humans. Vexitar's voice became quieter. By the end of the ceremony, half our fleet was emotionally compromised. Compromised how? Admirals were asking about human literature. Generals wanted to learn human music. Strategic planners were discussing the philosophical implications of human art. They started seeing the colonists as individuals with families and dreams and creative talents, instead of just targets to be eliminated. The ceremony was working. The ceremony was perfect. But that was not the real problem. Dr. Voss waited for him to continue. The real problem was Sang-ho. While everyone else was performing, he was sitting at a small table in the center of the square, just watching. Drinking something hot from a ceramic cup, taking notes on a paper pad, occasionally nodding or smiling. What was he doing? Coordinating. Every performance, every interaction, every emotional response was part of a larger pattern that Sang-Ho was monitoring and adjusting in real time. He was conducting a symphony of psychological manipulation using an entire colony as his orchestra. How do you know this? Because I was assigned to watch him specifically. Commander Zekthul suspected Sang-Ho was the colony's military leader, despite his claims to be just an educator. So while everyone else enjoyed the festival, I studied the human who seemed to be running it. What did you observe? Sang-Ho would make small gestures. A hand signal here, a nod there, a few words whispered to someone passing by. Each gesture would trigger tiny adjustments in the ceremony. A song would change key, a dance would shift tempo, a story would emphasize different themes. He was controlling the entire event. He was optimizing it, like a teacher helping students give their best performance. But the performance was designed to systematically eliminate our fleet's willingness to fight. Vextar began pacing again, his movements jerky with remembered tension. After 6 hours of cultural programming, Admiral Korthval announced that the bombardment was cancelled. The humans were too valuable to destroy. Instead, the hegemony would offer them full membership in our alliance with complete autonomy and protection. The colony had won. The colony had won without fighting. But Sang-Ho was not finished. What else did he do? He stood up from his table, walked to the center of the square and asked for attention. The festival noise died down. 3,000 ship crews, 50,000 soldiers and all the hegemony command staff focused on one small human in simple clothes. What did he say? He thanked us for coming to their celebration. He said the colonists were honored to meet so many different species and learn about their cultures. Then he made a proposal. What kind of proposal? A cultural exchange program. The colonists would teach interested hegemony personnel about human art, music, literature, and philosophy. In return, they wanted to learn about our cultures, our histories, our creative traditions. And Admiral Korthval accepted immediately. So did most of the other fleet commanders. They started making plans for extended stays, educational programs, artistic collaborations. The invasion fleet became a cultural mission. Vextar stopped pacing and sat down heavily. That was when I finally understood what Sang-Ho really was. What was he? A teacher. Everything he did, every plan he made, every strategy he implemented, it was all education. He was teaching us that humans could not be conquered because they were too valuable to destroy, too interesting to ignore, and too dangerous to underestimate. Dangerous how? Because they could make us want to protect them instead of destroy them. They could make us choose cooperation over conquest, curiosity over aggression, friendship over fear. Dr. Voss was typing rapidly again. What happened to your fleet? Half the ships stayed in orbit around Kepler 442b for the cultural exchange program. The other half returned to hegemony space with detailed reports about human capabilities. Within a month, the High Command issued new standing orders regarding contact with human settlements. What were the orders? Vextar looked directly at Dr. Voss with all three eyes. Approach with gifts. Offer trade agreements. Request permission for cultural exchanges. And under no circumstances should any hegemony force attempt military action against human colonies without first consulting with the Department of Xenological Studies and the Committee on Species. Preservation. You were reclassified? Humans were reclassified as a protected valuable species, too culturally significant and strategically dangerous to risk damaging through military conflict. Dr. Voss set down her stylus and leaned back in her chair. Is that the end of your testimony? No, Vextar said quietly. There is one more thing you need to know. About what happened when some of us tried to leave.